we're going to attempt a variation of a classic peanut brittle recipe, but we're doing it as part of our Fun Flavor Friday from 2 weeks ago. And we're going to make a salted caramel version. We're going to kind of convert it together as we go. I did look at the classic traditional recipe that I used to use, and that called for 1 cup of sugar, a half of a cup of corn syrup, a quarter of a cup of water, and a teaspoon of baking soda. We'll omit the corn syrup altogether. We're gonna pretend it doesn't even say corn syrup in there. I could have went out and bought a sugar-free maple syrup, but the one available to me isn't that great, and I make my own maple syrup with sweetener and maple flavor. So we're gonna add a teeny little bit of maple flavor to kind of fix the fact that we're not going to use any corn syrup, and we're not going to adjust the volume of water either. We're still going to use the same quarter of a cup of water. Now, with sweeteners, when I swap out sweeteners for a regular recipe, I honestly find 1/3 or less is generally the amount of sweetener that I want in there. So we're going to swap out the 1 cup of white sugar, and we're going to use 1/3 of a cup of sweetener of your choice. We're heating up our water. Add our 1/3 of a cup of sweetener. I have this on about 2 for heat. We want to melt and dissolve all of the sweetener. So we're just going to let that go. And we're going to add a half of a teaspoon of caramel flavored extract and a quarter of a teaspoon of maple flavored extract. I do not have a candy thermometer. My mother always taught me to check your candy temperature in cold water. So I've got a glass of cold water set aside. Once this cooks down a little bit, we will check the texture of it in cold water. Ideally, you want it to form a hard ball candy. Anything from soft to hard ball will depend on the texture of your brittle. Like, do you want one that's more chewy, kind of like a toffee? The harder the candy is, the more crunchy, like a traditional brittle it will be. So I'm just going to turn this up a teeny little bit, and we're going to get a good boil on that, because I think we're just about right to test our texture. I tip it so you guys can see a little bit. It's getting a good, like a good heavy boil on, and that's what we want. Continue to whisk it so that it doesn't burn. Want to drop just a little bit in and see how it immediately starts to string in our water. We're going to cook it just a little bit more because we want it to ball right up. So we're going to boil it just for another minute. It's all really nice and like super boily bubbly. We're going to take it off the heat and continue to stir it to add our butter. 2 tablespoons of butter. I ran out in my butter dish, but luckily I have a couple in my heart-shaped mold, which will equal out to 2 tablespoons. So we're going to put in our butter and continue to whisk that at the same time as the butter melts in there. Our 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and we're going to add that, and same thing, just continue to whisk it in, and it's going to foam up and give it a little bit more of the traditional brittle look. 1 cup raw pecan, throw that in there, and just continue so that it doesn't get too cool. I'm going to spray our parchment paper. You can butter it, but again, I'm running out of butter, so I'm just going to spray it with olive oil. Okay, and then we're going to pour this out over top of our parchment paper. Spread this out. We want it just to be so that it's 1 layer of pecan. Because we're making it a salted caramel pecan brittle. We're just going to lightly salt the top before it sets. And then that is ready to pop into the fridge to chill. And then once it's chilled, we will break up all of our pieces of brittle.